I'm here with Coach Stephanie Mock. Coach, thank you so much for your time. For the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of your motivation, and kind of where you are currently?
Yeah, so I hate talking about myself, to be honest, so I really want to get to the good stuff, but a little about me. I was a Division I volleyball player at West Virginia University.
Mm-hmm.
From there, that's where I got into strength and conditioning. I interned there, then I went to Pitt, and then I went to Clemson, where I spent the majority of my time. I was there for 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then now I am here as the Director of Olympic Sports Strength and Conditioning at Mississippi State. Just a little about me.
Mm-hmm.
I really like to prove people wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody doubts me, I definitely operate with a chip on my shoulder and really like to go against the grain.
Yeah.
So that's short, sweet, and to the point.
Okay. I love it. So how did you kind of figure out your interest in strength and conditioning?
Really, just when I was in college at West Virginia, my strength and conditioning coach had a huge impact on me beyond the weight room, just as a person.
Yeah.
And he was the one that really got me started, old Corey Twine. So, I was just lucky to have him for my college career.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay. So what is your passion in life, right? Why do you do what you do? I know a lot of people, they fall in love with strength and conditioning for like bigger reasons. So for some people, it might be service. For some people, they've had a similar situation as you. But for you personally, what kind of is the big goal and what's kind of your passion?
Yeah, I know growing up, my parents always told me to just do something that I love and doesn't feel like work. And every day that I come into the weight room, it doesn't feel like a job, which that's how I was raised.
Yeah.
And of course, our job, everybody knows it's a grind, but when you're coming in and doing something you love, and then I just love people.
Yeah.
So it just matches up.
I love that. Okay. So let's dive a little bit kind of into the training part of it, right? So how is working with kind of such a large number of sports at Clemson, how has that kind of affected your current outlook on how you train your teams?
Yeah, so I was at Clemson for 5 years. I literally started as an intern and moved up to the assistant director position under Rick Franzblau. And I would say being there, Rick's ran a very centralized program. So meaning in my time there, I worked with 6 different teams directly.
Okay.
But everything being centralized, Rick needed a president that everyone understood all the teams that trained in the facility, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
Especially starting there as an intern and working up the ranks because there's so many different teams, whether it's soccer and all the field sports, mastering bioenergetics, to rotational sports, golf, volleyball, baseball, working on speed and power output, and then, of course, working with track and field really allowed me to understand how all the elements come together. So the speed work versus conditioning-based days and these elements and really matching up the different strength sessions of the week in the weight room because track and field, there's a lot less room for error in that sport. And just physically, there's not as much tactical. There's more, of course, technical. But I think working with a team like that, working with all the different coaches too, gets you ready for a director role like this. And that's what Rick really harped on me is just get involved with everybody and then really be able to, of course, speak the language of all the different sports because you really don't know what you're going to work with at the school. And then, of course, in my position now as a director, I have to be able to speak the language with all of the coaches. So I think, too, just working in a centralized program, I think it's really important for interns and GAs to do this because you do get the opportunity and the exposure for all of the different sports, whether it's conditioning, speed work, rotational, and just like heavy lifting protocols because I think a lot of interns and GAs now, they tend to get pigeonholed early. They're like, well, I can work with this team. And that's really limiting their exposure to so many different things. So
No, I'd agree, especially with like, at our level or at your level or even at the assistant level, there's a lot of basketball-only positions, for example, and a lot of interns or basketball-only internships. And so while that might be beneficial for them in making that contact and that connection with that coach, it also might have a double-edged sword as far as, like you said, they're not learning a lot from other sports,
For sure. Yeah, you want to be well-rounded.
Okay. So that's interesting. So what else have you kind of been able to take from Clemson that you kind of apply in your current philosophy in your role as a director now?
Yeah, whenever I got here in Mississippi State, I really made it a precedent that I wanted to get the weight room centralized because we did have 2 Olympic weight rooms here at first when I got here. And the one difference between here and Clemson is Clemson we had 14 Olympic sports versus here we have 9. So I knew with the new setup that I've created with Sorinex, like we have more racks than we did at Clemson. And our weight room's plenty big. I really wanted to centralize things, not only to get all the teams in one space so I could get to know all the coaches, but to keep my staff in one place because even having staff meetings, when you're spread between 2 spaces, it limits the interaction time that you get, especially being a brand new director. And I brought one of my old interns from Clemson with me. He's my assistant here now. Like you want everybody to be in one place because it makes things that much easier, and just relationships to be built with the sport coaches, I think is really big, you know, and all the student athletes. I want to know everybody, and I want a similar setup as Clemson is everybody's helping with everybody and just building those relationships because you never know who's going to leave and have to take over, and it makes things that much easier. Yeah,
that's really important. Okay. So obviously technology has been a really big push in the recent years, you know. So how do you guys kind of utilize technology, and what's kind of your go-tos or your staples, if you will?
Yeah, I really like to break our technology into 5 categories. That being diagnostic testing, auto-regulation and performance profiling, load management, athlete readiness assessment, and data analytics. So the first one being diagnostic testing. So we use, with valve performance, the Nord board and the groin bar, and looking at discrepancies left and right. So like with the Nord board, looking at hamstring risk, ACL injury risk, and looking at the asymmetry of we like to mark 10% imbalance. And above is like a yellow flag, and then 15% and above is a red flag with the Nord board. And then just looking at the groin bar with adductor weakness and correlating it with groin strains. So we like to look at the AB adduction and adduction ratios throughout season. And this allows us to see just test and measure muscular and neural fatigue. In that regard, along with we use the Muscle Lab Ergo Test contact grid, looking at RSI, so flight time over contact time. Of course, I use that heavily with volleyball, for example. That's one of my teams. And that's just really looking at combining the ability to jump high and get off the ground quickly, along with looking at the elastic qualities of the student athlete. So those are a few. I'll keep it rolling because I got a bunch. So,
So
and then
keep going.
Kind of going into performance testing and energy system evaluation, we do use the GymAware units. So looking at velocity-based training with whether it's the Olympic lifts, trap bar jumps. But we really like to set target velocities, and then it's nice because all the reps go to the cloud, so we can look at everything, go back online and look at reps from the student athlete's freshman year to their senior year, along with looking at individual and team reports. Looking at, it can do the predicted 1RM, so it allows us for testing protocols at max strength to do safer loads, just not putting the student athlete at risk. And then creating leaderboards, I really like that with the GymAware. Create some competition, especially with like track athletes. We're doing the trap bar jumps, and we find a way to run it up to our TVs in the weight room, so it really gets them to compete. I like a lot.
No, that's really interesting. And then going back to kind of say for the Nord board, for example, right? So you do your diagnostics and you kind of figure out who's in specific categories or who's most at risk. How do you guys kind of use that to drive decisions?
With that, really looking at in-season training, and we also use it with return to play protocol because we have a pretty close relationship with athletic training. But just talking with the coaches, because the one big thing I like to say with the coaches, because it's not going to be the end-all be-all, right? But you'd rather assess than assume. So it allows us to paint the full picture of if it's track practice and they're planning on doing some high-speed sprinting, them maybe tapering it back. Maybe taking off a couple reps, for example. But I think sometimes people get caught up that like, hey, we can make A, B, and C decisions when that's not the case, but it's just allowing us to paint a picture. Going down the road of what we need to change at practice. And maybe it's just dialing down the volume a little bit or switching up days. Hey, they're not ready to sprint yet. Let's go at a lower threshold. Maybe next week we speed it back up after looking at where they're at on the Nord board. But
Okay. No, I like that. Okay. And then kind of moving forward a little bit, right? So how has being a collegiate volleyball player affected your outlook on training volleyball?
So with that, I would say I think it's always extremely beneficial to speak the language with the sport coach.
Mm-hmm.
So them knowing that I played at a high level,
Yeah.
I think that's great. And they really automatically start to speak the language of the sport and
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about your game style and things like that.
Yeah.
And I really stress that to my staff. Whatever team you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
whether you played the sport or not, you have to be able to speak the language. That's going to set you up
Mm-hmm.
to be successful.
Yeah.
Along with that, I'd say before we start conference play, when we're in tournament play,
Mm-hmm.
like I felt what they felt. So when
Yeah.
you're playing 2 or 3 matches in a day,
Yeah.
like you have to understand that the volume is extremely high,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to taper back on the volume in the weight room. And them knowing that, and
Mm-hmm.
like I do travel with volleyball a good bit, like and understanding that,
Yeah.
like they respect that a lot.
Yeah.
So I think just knowing that I've been there and done that is a huge piece.
Okay.
Too.
So on that same kind of token, right, what does training kind of look like for volleyball, roughly speaking, in the off and in-season periods?
Yeah, with volleyball, so off season, since we just got off of that, I had 4 days a week.
Okay.
And it was different this year because the hours were split differently, right? So it used to be 6 hours with us and 2 hours with the sport coach, and now it's been 4 and 4. So we really had to revamp it.
Mm-hmm.
But, really breaking down all their plyometric training
Mm-hmm.
and looking at unilateral, bilateral, multi-directional jumps for the plyos, landing mechanics, and then also just creating that base and going back and I had a younger team, so going back to the fundamentals is extremely important for them. So just taking that time to develop the general strength in the squat, deadlift, and different lunging patterns, and then just really honing in on the plyometric training, and then talking with the coach about practice and what she's trying to achieve, because they do use the Polar Team Pro heart rate monitors. So I knew having a younger and newer team and a newer head coach, we really wanted to hone in on, okay, at volleyball practice, what are we trying to achieve? And looking at conditioning metrics, how much I really truly need to do in the weight room. Because it was definitely, our team was really needing some weight room work, I'd say, from a strength perspective. So I put that at the front, really laying out what's most important to least important. So I think you really have to look at the student athletes you're working with. Whether it's a lot of freshmen and sophomores or if it's a more veteran team, maybe do more speed type movements, trap bar jumps, things like that, a little bit more advanced. But
okay. And kind of pulling on that thread a little bit more, right? What does kind of your energy system development training look like for volleyball? Because I've seen it split both ways. A lot of people do things more like circuit style to take care of that, so they'll kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Whereas some people, they still like to take it to the track and field. And not to say that one way is wrong or right, but what is kind of your approach?
Yeah, no, I think from an energy system development standpoint, really working on combining some jumps with some sprinting, of course, because you want to drive their vertical up. So I've done jump runs, so it's like 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. You do some type of jump, you rest, and then you sprint, jog, walk, because you really want to, you're aiming to mimic the sport, right? So I'll try to incorporate some jumping. I'll also do some high-intensity continuous training with them. So combining all the different explosive movements to improve resistance to fatigue and the fast-twitch muscle fibers, which is what you're aiming to do with volleyball.
Okay. Awesome. And then moving forward, right, another one of your sports that you have is softball. So let's dive into that a little bit. So what are some of the nuances to keep in mind when training a rotational sport?
Yeah, with softball, to start, you have to think about the athlete that you're building. And it's a speed and power athlete. But they also need to have a really strong aerobic foundation at the same time, because they're playing so many games. So it's definitely a unique sport that I love, and I'm not biased towards, I played volleyball in college, so that's the sport that I love. Like softball, they really love to get after it in the weight room. So I think from that standpoint, like you do have to lift them heavy, because you have to remember that they need a certain amount of body mass and strength to be able to swing that implement, So understanding that And then we do go in and focus, like, I don't know if you want me to break down the year.
Okay, yeah. That'd be great, yeah.
But looking at just in the fall, I just focus on general strength. And then from there, because you were talking about rotational sports, I take it more plane specific. So frontal and transverse plane, med ball work. We have Kaiser machines in here, so doing a lot of chops and lifts.
Oh, I love it, okay.
Yeah. And then for their speed work, we really work on focusing on certain positions. Being able to move is extremely important. So looking at the mid infielders and outfielders, I put an extreme importance on relative strength and power.
Yeah.
So you have to remember with softball, it is 60 feet around the bases. Yeah. So acceleration and strength is critical.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, that's really important. And then kind of on that, again, pulling a little bit more on that, a lot of, let's say, softball coaches, they have their ideas about conditioning that they're really set in, right? So specific conditioning tests and things like that. How has that been for you, being able to work with softball programs?
I really enjoy working with our head softball coach, Van. Like, she's someone that does harp on the mental toughness aspect of things.
Yeah.
But she's extremely open-minded. So I just really try to tell all head coaches that you want to have a conditioning test that isn't just pass-fail. Like, you want to be able to measure from year to year. So freshman year to senior year, they shouldn't be at the same conditioning level, right? So making sure it's something that you can measure, and like we do the beep test, the yo-yo intermittent beep test with them. And then if she wants to do some type of mental toughness, like conditioning test, she can do it, you know? I'm not mad at her, but she knows that I'm going to do my thing, and if she wants to do something, she can do her thing. But at the end of the day, she's completely like handed it over to me, like, hey, Steph, they're yours. Do what you need to do. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's very valuable system to be in, because I know a lot of programs, there's some pushback, right, from one side or from another, where that open-mindedness or that communication just isn't there like it should be. So it's awesome to see that.
Yeah.
And then kind of pushing a little bit more on that, right, is there anything specific that you do? So, for example, for, say, a pitcher, right, as far as shoulder care?
You know what? A lot of our pitchers, well, the one thing that you have to look at with baseball versus softball is some of your softball pitchers do hit, you know? So in that regard, I don't change up too much for the pitchers. Like in season, they won't be doing any straight bar benching and things like that. Not too much pressing. And I work a lot with our athletic trainer on, she kind of takes the role on that. You know, I'll stay with the position players and warm them up. She'll take the pitchers, whether they started like our number one, our ace, if she throws Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday being a different amount of innings possibly. But she really takes the role on that, which I appreciate, because I got to manage all the other crazy people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, not as much as like a baseball, because I used to work with baseball a lot at Clemson. And with pitchers being able to do multiple roles, softball, like, you don't change things up too much. Of course, volume and intensity in season, you're not going to be having them push the same amount as the position players, but it's not as drastic as baseball.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so with that, right, so a sport like softball, again, it's a unique sport because, like you said, it's an acceleration sport. They're only running 60 between bases. And so with that, how do you maintain, say, conditioning level for some of those that may not be playing as much, or how does that kind of look?
Yeah, we'll do some cross-training. So we use some of the Airdyne bikes and then also the Versa climbers. So it allows me to get their conditioning work in without all the pounding on the joints, you know, a little bit of cross-training, you know, and you have to be aware that sometimes they're in the dugout snacking the whole entire time. You want to keep their body composition under control. I mean, that's just me being straightforward and transparent. So
I love it.
I mean, it is what it is. Right?
There's not much you can do about that, you know? So, okay. No, that's interesting. Okay. And then let's dive a little bit more into kind of some of the leadership and the continuing education, right? So what's kind of your approach in managing your staff?
Yeah, I mean, the first question I got here, because, I mean, being transparent, this is my first director role, right? The first question I asked myself is just, what am I trying to accomplish with my staff? You know? And I reminded myself, I'm not here to manage them, I'm here to lead them. I want my staff to feel that it's our program, not just my program. I really wanted to make sure that was known and heard when I got here.
No, I like that, and I think that's a great approach because it's not the approach that everyone has, right? So there's a lot of people that like to show who's in charge, right? Which for better or for worse, that's just how it is. There's a division between certain people that like to lead by example and certain people like to be seen leading, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that's really awesome to hear. So how does your kind of continuing education approach differ for an intern all the way up to kind of an assistant role?
Yeah, so just in general with responsibilities, like I really make our interns earn their responsibilities.
Okay.
So I mean, it starts with just cleaning. Like, okay, if you can execute that, I know I can give you 4 more things to do.
Yeah.
Right? Just slowly build it up. Probably not going to give them 4 more things, but I really take a lot of time, one, to look at what interns we're bringing in and make sure they fit my mold and my program and the people that I already have here. But my big thing is deserve nothing, earn everything. So everything that you do in here is earned.
Yeah.
And then also, like, versus that's the unpaid interns. My assistants, I really aim to delegate responsibilities just based off of what their strengths are and then just their interests. I want them to thrive here, and whatever pieces I'm giving them to research on and this, that, and the other, they have extreme interest on, and that's why I'm really working on bringing in a diverse group of people. I can't bring in 5 more steps. That would not work out well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you're always wanting to look to hire what you're not, right, to kind of complete the department, so I like that. And then do you guys have GAs at your position here?
Yeah, we do have GAs, and they actually have sport responsibilities too, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so how does that model look as far as for them? Do they get treated essentially like an assistant, or what does that kind of look like?
I think it's the same thing, especially me coming in and really assessing the staff that was here, which it was really only a GA, and then I came in, I brought an assistant with me.
Yeah.
Our baseball guy came in.
Okay.
And then it was one other GA, she graduated, but I think because I didn't hire them, but I wanted to take them as my own, I really saw, okay, what have you done in the past, and what can I give you that you're going to be successful in, and I can trust you to execute.
Yeah.
So it's my job to prepare them for a full-time role, because that's the next step they're going to take.
Yeah.
So I really see what they can handle, and then I kind of explain to them, all right, these are the areas you need to improve upon for the next step, because I was always taught that, hey, handle yourself like the next person in front of you. So, like, if you're a GA, carry yourself like an assistant. If you're an assistant, carry yourself like an assistant director, etc. So I think I really tell them that understand your role and responsibility. You're probably not going to do, like, you're not going to be over the internship curriculum just because my assistant's going to be over that. But really understand what your next step's going to be, because it's my job to prepare them for that.
I like that. Okay. And then moving forward, as far as like impact, right? What are some resources that have had a big impact on you, whether it's like a book or a podcast, a conversation, a seminar, or anything of that matter?
Yeah, I'll give you just kind of a diverse group. So, like, books, I'd have to say The Mechanics of Sprinting and Hurdling by Ralph Mann.
Okay.
Just because when I started working in track and field, I was like, man, I really need to dive deep into this. I was a athlete in high school, but I think that book was extremely beneficial. From a conditioning standpoint, I know whenever I read Ultimate MMA Conditioning by Joel Jameson, that was extremely beneficial.
Okay.
From a podcast standpoint, I have to say Pacey Performance with Rob Pacey, and also Just Fly, Sports Performance, Joel Smith. I've really enjoyed listening to. And then, I mean, I'm really big on people.
Okay.
So I just have always been taught, wherever you go, you want to make sure that you're taking yourself into a position that you're around the right people and they're going to invest time into you. So I'd have to say I'd have to give a lot of credit from a resource standpoint to just Rick Franzblau at Clemson, because he really, I kind of told him, hey, this is what I want to do. I really want to be a director. And he took a lot of time invested in me to prepare me for when I got the opportunity to make sure that I wasn't going to step into it and sink, you know? I stepped into it and I felt extremely ready and prepared, and I couldn't have done it without him. So I think he was an extremely important resource throughout my career, and I think people sometimes overlook that with whether you're going to like an internship, like making sure when you get to that internship, like people there are going to take care of you, which you will, which you hope. I mean, all professionals in our field are going to do that, but I think sometimes with interns, you have to remember that, okay, if you're taking on 5 interns, your job as a full-time person is to make sure you invest in them because they're working for free. So you're paying them in knowledge, ideally. So don't waste their time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really big, important point, right? We are responsible for kind of welcoming in that next generation of coaches,
For sure.
So yeah, that's really important. And then kind of on that same note, right? What are some things that kind of make you or some things that kind of make you unique as a coach or that have made your thought process a little bit different?
I've always lived by just get comfortable being uncomfortable. So putting myself in situations that I know are going to be uncomfortable, but I know I'm going to grow from it.
Yeah,
and I
important.
go back to even my first internship at West Virginia. It was with the football strength and conditioning staff, and kind of starting out the rip, working around football when it's not very common that you see females in the sport of football. Not saying they can't be in it, but I think starting off like that really kind of set the tone for my career going forward of, if I want to grow, I need to put myself in these uncomfortable situations and just find pressure as positive,
Yeah. No, I like that. Okay. So then pulling on that thread a little bit more, right? If you have any, what are some quotes that you kind of live by?
That one that I just said, and I'd have to go and say consistency builds trust. I really like people around me that consistently perform. Yeah. It's one thing to do it one time, but to do it over and over again takes some guts. So I really, consistency builds trust is something that I love. Complaining is not a strategy.
Okay.
I hate people around me that complain because it's just a waste of time, to be honest. And then do your job. It's either you do it or you don't. And I think that's the thing that I tell my staff, it's either you make it happen or you don't. Yeah. So, rightfully so. If you're in trouble, it's probably because you didn't make things happen.
Yeah.
So I try to be black and white in that regard.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, those are some really applicable quotes. I really like that. You can just take those and apply them to your life right now, or do a self-check. So I like that. You mentioned that football experience, right? But is there another thought or experience from your past that you've kind of held on to that's made a big difference in your life now?
Yeah, I have to say, one, just getting the opportunity to play at a Power 5 school. And then off of that, just getting my first internship at West Virginia University.
Okay.
It'll always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Going to WVU, playing there, and getting my first internship there, because without that opportunity with Mike Joseph and Daryl Bauer, I couldn't be in the field, without that first step, and they gave it to me, so I just really appreciate it.
Okay. What is the best advice that you've ever been given?
One thing that's really stuck with me is 2 ears, 1 mouth. And that being, there's so many people out there that just want to prove that they're the smartest person in the room. Yeah. And even if you're listening or thinking, you're listening to somebody ask you a question, but you're already thinking about your answer, rather than listening to the person talk. Yeah. So my thought is with that, you just need to sit back and ask questions, because you can learn so much just sitting in the room and listening and then asking, until I was a director, I'm always sitting in the room and I'm man, I'm surrounded by some great resources right now. I just need to ask questions because you don't care what I know, especially if you're going, let's say, going on a site visit somewhere and you're hey, I want to come talk shop. I'm going into their program to ask questions about them. I'm not going in there to talk about myself.
Yeah, they didn't ask you to come,
Yeah, so I think that's just really important, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and just taking in everything you can that's around you.
Okay. So in contrast to that, what's the worst advice that you've ever been given?
I'd have to say, just people taking a dogmatic approach to training. So just thinking that no matter what team you have to Olympic lift, you have to bench, you have to squat, you have to clean. And I think with that, you could be putting a square peg in a round hole, Just so I think that's probably maybe the worst advice that I've gotten. I think
Okay.
that's a great question, though. I really like it.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see because some people they say I don't remember any bad advice, which is great, but then other people they remember it and they go the other way. So it's it works in both ways. So it's just interesting to hear people's different answers to that. So yeah, okay. And then the last kind of question here: what are some projects that you're kind of currently working on, and how can people reach out to you and follow your journey?
Yeah, a big piece that I'm working on here at Mississippi State is just creating more full-time positions
Mm,
and more paid positions with paid interns.
yeah.
Because I think so many people get out of the field because they financially just can't stay in it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They'll
Yeah.
do multiple unpaid internships, not getting paid any money.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to work a job when you're doing an unpaid internship.
Yeah.
You want to seem fully committed.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you do a GA and then you can't find that full-time spot. Like I wanted to create an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for people to, hey, come here, be a paid intern,
Yeah.
spend 11 months with me, whether you're traveling with teams, doing this, doing that. So that's one thing. And then just building relationships with professionals on campus.
Mm,
Just whether it's engineering, like
yeah.
I've been working on validating different wearables that we'll possibly get, and exercise science, because you don't know what interns you could even get from those departments.
Yeah.
And why not use those professionals?
Mhm.
They're right here in Mississippi and on campus, so why not?
Yeah. No, that's really important. And going back to the thing that you said about finances, I think that's huge as well, right? And that's an awesome thing that you're doing because, again, yeah, a lot of people do a lot of unpaid internships and they go into a fair amount of debt. And then even if they do get that first job, right, it's not a super lucrative position. So it's like almost shooting yourself in the foot if you don't really fully commit to it and kind of get past that stage,
For sure.
So
No, I completely agree. That's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Well, Coach, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. Good luck on all the projects that you're working on, and I really hope that we can connect again soon in the future.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.